Hello everyone. In this lesson, I'll tell you about the basics of programming in Unity. Scripts here are written in C#. We'll talk about the syntax of the language, right? Hello world. Learn how to use autocomplete in Visual Studio, and show various messages in the console. Programming is the main part of developing a game. If you are making a simple mobile game alone, then 80% of the time in this process is likely to be occupied by writing code. So, a developer of Unity games needs to have a good command of the C# language. This, and the following lessons, can be taken as the basics of programming. Since we intend to make a full-fledged game, we will write a lot of code in the following lessons, and if you get confused with the code, I advise you to review the lessons several times. Be sure to repeat what you learn, and try to experiment on your own. Write something that is slightly different from what I show. I've created a new empty scene. Now we'll create a new script. Right-click the project window and select the C# script. I recommend naming this script. Let's assume that later it will be responsible for moving the box. A test script like this will move the box, so I name it box_move in this way, without spaces, the word move with a capital letter. Then I open it by double-clicking. In this standard script template, there is a class name. It is very important that this class name match the file name. If you suddenly decide to rename a class, which may easily occur in the process, then you need to rename it in the script as well. This is the code template that Unity creates by default in a new script. It shows two methods, start and update. What is a method? It is a certain block of code. In terms of programming, you could say it was a function. I will call it a method in C# if we're not too concerned with peculiarities of terminology. Start and update are special methods, and Unity automatically calls them. Start is called at the very beginning before the first frame and once. And the update method is called every frame. Let's see how it works. Start by simply showing a message in the console. I'll write debug.log here, followed by round brackets, something in those brackets, and a semicolon. This function enters a message in the console. Let's do it again for those who haven't programmed at all. First of all, we don't have to write all the words. For example, I write the letter D and Visual Studio immediately suggests what we most likely had in mind. To make fewer mistakes, it's better to choose these options from here. Click Enter, we have written the word debug, then we put a dot here and choose. Next, debug is a class and it contains methods, if the terminology is used correctly. In other words, debug is a class in which there are different methods for tests. Log is a specific method that outputs messages into the console, and enters some text into the console. The method has round brackets that specify the arguments of this method parameters that are needed for its operation. Since it outputs a message into the console, we actually write what it should output into the console. For example, this number. At the end, you must put a semicolon. In C#, it means the end of the command. If you do not put a semicolon at the end, the script will not start. Visual Studio there will not forgive you for this. There is an underscore like that here, and it often correctly suggests what needs to be done. A semicolon is required, so if there is something red, you definitely need to figure out what's going on. Now let's see how this script works. To do this, you need to save it. Press Ctrl+S or click the floppy disk. By the way, if the script is not saved, you can see this asterisk here, which reminds you. Now we've saved it, and we'll go back to Unity. For this script to work, we need to drag it to the object it must be present in the scene. Let me create a new box. And drag the script onto it, right here in the inspector. Our script is assigned as a new component. In fact, we are simply creating a new component. It has a boring function. All it will do is output two words, but then, it will move the box. In order for this to work, click play, and you also need to look at the console window. This is necessary for Unity to output all sorts of errors to you, and for tests that you create and write yourself. If you do not have a console window, then it is here. Window, General, Console. All windows are located here in the window. If you have lost something, you can find it here. Click play. As we expected, these messages were output 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When you select these messages, here at the bottom you can see which line of code and which script output them. You can also click this blue thing, and you will go to a specific line in Visual Studio. You can try the debug.log method. Here you can add up numbers, for example. If you write 5 plus 6 here, then the sum will be output. Or you can multiply the numbers there, or divide, or you can output a certain line into the console, say, "Hello world." Something typical of a programmer. If you want to write a line, then you need to write it in quotation marks. Because if you just write words like that, then Visual Studio thinks these are either commands or variable names, and it emphasizes them. Here it says that the name does not exist in the current context. It looks like we wrote a name, but it's nowhere. It doesn't mean anything. It's actually just a regular line, so it should be in quotation marks. It has become orange. You can add something to the line. Add a number to the line, for example. Or write something like that. The sum of 5 and 6 is equal to this expression. It will just add a number to the line at the beginning. It will be written as it is. But here we have written an expression in brackets. When you write mathematical expressions, these rules of mathematics apply here. If the expression is in brackets, then it will be calculated at the beginning, and then added to what is here. Let's see what will be written in the end. Save it. Don't forget to save. Restart the game. What is written is output. The sum of 5 and 6 equals 11. You need some more spaces, but this is your task. Now let's see how the update works. We have written all these commands in the start method, the game starts, and they are output in the first frame. Here, at the very beginning, it all triggers. Let's see what happens if we write a message at the start. I'll just write it here. I mean the update. Let's just write an update line here. Save it, then go back to Unity. You see, now this message is just being written every frame. Here you can see the total of messages that have already been output into the console. Pay attention so that all these buttons are active, otherwise you just won't see a certain type of messages. In short, it will be a very strange problem. Then there's the collapse button. It allows you to compile the same messages. If you have something written there in the update every frame, then it's convenient to compile it so that you just don't have this message in the console. We also have a clear button if, for example, we have stopped everything and want to clear the console so that we can look at it from scratch again and test, then click Clear. By the way, note that these boxes are checked here. Let them be checked. Clear on play. When you click play, the console is automatically cleared and enters what happens at the start of the game. In the following videos, we'll look at how to use scripts to influence some objects in the scene, to change something. Now, let's talk about the syntax of the language again. What is important, and what is not important? First of all, the semicolon is important. It marks the end of the command. But something like the number of indents or spaces is not important. The number of spaces or enters, indents, and hyphenations to the new line will not affect the operation of your program, location and position of the quotation mark. There are some code rules. I will also talk about them. How to arrange the code carefully, though extra spaces will not affect the operation of the program. The case of letters is very important. That is, if you start the word log with a small letter, it is already a completely different command, so it will not work. I will also note that there are such indents, yes, tabulation. We see that the messages are one indent away from the methods in which they are located. In other words, if everything went like this in the course of your work. I think newbies always have something like this going on all the time. If there are some unknown spaces, then you can just press the Ctrl+K, Ctrl+D combination. The reason you see such complex keyboard combinations in Visual Studio is because there are many different functions. You must first press Ctrl+K, then Ctrl+D. This will change the code and it will be proper. When I work there, something strange can sometimes happen, some extra spaces and indents. Click here and everything is okay. I strongly advise you to periodically press this button. In conclusion, a couple of recommendations for those who are encountering programming for the first time. I suspect that different brackets, quotation marks, and semicolons may frighten you, but imagine that you write 1,000 lines of code, then you will get used to the syntax of the language and will recognize commands faster.